The rain hammered down outside St. Mary's Hospital. Young nurse Nora James, her thin scrubs soaked, clutched a cheap bag of belongings, brutally fired for unauthorized procedure. The chief physician had screamed, "You are nothing here, Nurse James." Nora bowed her head, walking heavily into the night rain, attempting to stifle a sob. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently as a fierce gale swept the parking lot. Two massive black MH-60S military helicopters roared down, skids kicking up water and debris. Armed figures flung open the doors and shouted over the deafening noise, "Where's the nurse? We need her now!" Nora James was 30 years old, a newly transferred emergency room nurse. She was quiet, soft-spoken, and habitually stood at the back of any hospital meeting, always giving way to others. On her very first day at the prestigious St. Mary's, her timid demeanor and the deep, persistent shadows beneath her eyes were immediately judged and dismissed. The immediate assessment whispered through the staff lounge was unanimous. Just a small-town nurse, nothing truly special. Norah, without fail, always took the most demanding and thankless tasks. She handled the complex, messy wound dressings, silently mopped up large volumes of bodily fluids, struggled alone to push the heaviest gurneys, and calmly stabilized the most agitated or violent patients. She never, ever complained about the workload. The younger, often arrogant resident doctors routinely and publicly dismissed her expert, subtle clinical suggestions. They would pause, look at her over the tops of their reading glasses, and condescendingly advise, "You're just a nurse, Norah. Stay in your professional lane. Don't overthink the big picture." What they critically failed to notice, however, was a pattern. Norah was always the first person to enter a genuinely dangerous or critical patient room, and she possessed an unnerving, almost unsettling tranquility in the face of imminent chaos and death. It wasn't just tranquility, it was a deeply honed awareness. While other nurses relied on monitors, Norah possessed a preternatural ability to read subtle physiological cues, the metallic scent of specific internal bleeding, the micro-twitch of a muscle bundle signaling impending seizure, the minute shifts in a patient's eyes that told her the true state of their consciousness. She routinely ensured her personal supply cart was pre-stocked with specialized equipment the hospital rarely ordered, components critical for high-speed, military-grade trauma response. This quiet efficiency often went unseen, mistaken for simple tidiness. The attending physician involved in the subsequent incident, a man named Dr. Harrison, viewed this independent initiative not as competence, but as a direct challenge to his authority. The defining incident that led to her firing occurred during a chaotic, understaffed evening shift. A patient suffering from severe drug shock was rapidly coding. The attending physician, panicking, made a critical calculation error, administering a dangerously incorrect dose and preparing to shock the patient prematurely. With speed that was almost invisible, Norah gently and non-aggressively approached the head of the bed. She carefully rotated the patient's jaw and executed a highly specialized, non-invasive maneuver designed to restore a failing airway, a technique known only to a tiny, highly specialized cohort of advanced critical care personnel. The patient immediately responded, his breathing catching and stabilizing immediately. The crisis was completely averted, the rapid recovery stunning everyone in the trauma bay into silence. Instead of praise, the attending physician rounded on her, his face dark red with fury, and he screamed in front of the entire ER staff, "You violated my direct protocol. You bypassed the entire chain of command. What if you had been disastrously wrong, Nurse James? You could have killed him." Norah, already deeply accustomed to the professional hostility and the lack of credit, simply dropped her gaze to the floor. She quietly apologized. "I'm sorry, doctor. I only wanted to save him. His airway was occluded and you were running out of time." Sure. Following the high-profile incident, a clique of younger, more insecure nurses began actively ridiculing and isolating her behind her back. Their cruel whispers were audible in the break room. "She acts like she's some kind of medical genius. Who does she think she is, trying to teach the doctors?" They would sneer with unnecessary venom. Norah never fought back, never sought to defend herself. She was tragically resigned to being perpetually misunderstood, used to having her profound competence dismissed as unprofessional arrogance. She often used her meager, hard-earned paycheck to buy warm, nourishing meals for the homeless and indigent patients, those whom the hospital staff routinely overlooked, finding small, private ways to express her massive, silent empathy. After her long, grueling double shifts, she frequently chose to walk the long-distance home, sometimes for miles because she simply could not afford the necessary, expensive repairs for her unreliable, beat-up old car. Tucked away deep in the back of her small, shared metal locker, Norah kept a single, old, slightly battered, anonymous tin box. No one knew that inside, carefully preserved and protected, was a worn black, military-issue morale patch, featuring the sharp silhouette of a fierce eagle, and a single cryptic line of text almost completely rubbed away from combat friction and time. Combat Medic, Unit Nara. Curry. One night, a veteran, older nurse, who had served 2 tours in military medicine years ago, briefly caught sight of the patch when Norah quickly opened her locker. Her face instantly drained of color, turning a shocking, ghostly white. "Where in God's name did you find that, Norah?" she whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of fear and profound disbelief. "That belongs to a special response team. It's absolutely legendary." Norah calmly closed the heavy locker door, locking it with a soft, definitive click, and offered only a gentle, profoundly distant smile. "It's just an old keepsake from a life that's over. Nothing important." 91 words. The very evening Nora James was terminated, the city was instantly plunged into chaos. A catastrophic, highly complex 5-car pileup occurred near the main naval base access road, a brutal, horrifying chain reaction caused by the blinding, torrential downpour. St. Mary's emergency room immediately received 12 concurrent critical trauma cases, overloading the entire system in a matter of seconds. The ER devolved into total pandemonium, the chief physician screaming, panicked, unhelpful directions, and insults across the bloody trauma bay. The situation spiraled rapidly. Nurses were struggling to manage multiple IV drips simultaneously. The blood bank was running dangerously low on O-negative. Dr. Harrison, overwhelmed and sweating profusely, was attempting to manage 3 separate intubations at once, his face reflecting pure, uncontrolled panic. The chaos exposed the structural flaws of the entire unit. Dr. Harrison, in his panic, inserted a chest tube incorrectly on patient 2, causing a brief, catastrophic pneumothorax that took 3 nurses working frantically to stabilize. He roared incoherently, but his voice was drowned out by the alarms. Every minute, the ER's critical tasks, documentation, medication reconciliation, and patient transfer logistics fell further behind. It was then, in that moment of undeniable failure, that the veteran staff finally understood the true silent role Norah played. She wasn't just a nurse. She was the invisible, adaptive operating system that prevented the entire hospital machine from crashing. They realized too late that they had dismissed the only person capable of handling this level of multi-system trauma. The loss of Norah, the silent machine who could manage 5 critical tasks while calmly directing others, was now a devastating, palpable void. A frantic young resident doctor shouted into the escalating noise, "Patient 6 is crashing. His blood pressure is plummeting rapidly. Call in every single extra staff member. We need any available hands now." A veteran nurse, near tears from the severe strain and exhaustion, yelled back a devastating, undeniable truth. "There's no one left to call. We lost 1 person today, remember? Nurse Nora James was fired just an hour ago." Meanwhile, 50 kilometers offshore, tragedy simultaneously struck a U.S. Navy SEAL team on a high-stakes, covert maritime mission. Their MH-60 helicopter's cabin suffered a catastrophic pressure failure due to unexpected shrapnel, leaving 4 elite SEAL operators with immediate, devastating internal injuries. The lone, dedicated combat medic aboard the vessel was instantly pinned beneath heavy, dislodged equipment, unable to safely reach or effectively treat the two most critically wounded men. Time was rapidly running out, measured now in single precious seconds. The pinned medic, identified as Specialist Reyes, was screaming over the comms that the pressure changes were causing rapid, systemic failure in the downed operators. Reyes knew the only viable move was the reverse thoracic stabilization, a complex high-risk procedure that required near-perfect anatomical knowledge in a field-tested calm Reyes simply couldn't muster while crushed and in agony. They needed one person, and one person only, the unique individual who was known across the special operations community to possess the rare surgical knowledge for one specific, nearly impossible field procedure. That procedure was the reverse thoracic stabilization, a highly proprietary and specialized technique taught only to the highest tier, most trusted frontline military medics. This maneuver was so dangerous, so exquisitely sensitive, that it was never practiced in simulations. It was reserved solely for deep field trauma where external help was non-existent. It required identifying and accessing a specific, tiny anatomical window between the fourth and fifth ribs, followed by a precise rotational movement of the chest plate to correct internal pressure differentials without causing immediate spinal shock. Specialist Reyes, despite his considerable training, simply lacked the specific, specialized surgical training and the required preternatural hand steadiness to execute this life-or-death, high-wire act under such crushing physical and emotional distress. It wasn't about courage, it was about milliseconds of perfect surgical technique. The SEAL team leader, his voice cracking and raw with professional desperation, grabbed the satellite radio handset and roared the command, "Call the base! Find combat medic Nora James. Is she alive? Find her immediately, whatever the cost." Back at St. Mary's, completely oblivious to the dire military crisis she could solve, the chief physician signed Nora's termination papers with a flourish of his pen, then spitefully threw the damp official document directly into Nora's face, his lips curled in overwhelming contempt. "Get out of my emergency room, you unauthorized liability! You are officially done here." Nora simply turned and walked away, her movements slow, silent, and completely devoid of any reaction. Not even a flicker of anger, nor a tear of sadness. She simply accepted the profound injustice. Walking down the main road, caught fully in the fierce eye of the downpour, the cheap, worn-out soles of her boots were instantly saturated with cold water. Every single step she took felt heavier, weighted by her failure and her deep despair. Then suddenly, jarringly, her cheap smartphone vibrated violently in the pocket of her soaking wet scrubs. The screen flashed the unmistakable notification. "Unknown number." Nora answered with a hesitant, almost broken voice. The voice on the other end was clipped, authoritative, and utterly devoid of civilian emotion. "Nora James? Are you available for immediate tasking? We need you. Immediately, Commander." Nora's hand trembled slightly, the phone nearly slipping from her chilled grasp. I'm not a nurse anymore. I was just fired by the hospital." The voice didn't waver, adopting a tone of steel. "Listen closely, Nora. Your credentials don't come from St. Mary's. They were earned in blood and fire. Our men need Unit 9's hands. I'm not asking if you're employed. I'm asking if you remember your oath." 3 minutes later, precisely 3 agonizing minutes, the unmistakable, thunderous roar of specialized helicopter engines ripped the dark, rain-soaked sky completely apart. The sound was deafening, the air beneath the rotors crackling with immediate, urgent intensity. 2 massive figures in full black tactical gear, their faces hidden by featureless ballistic helmets, rappelled down from the hovering black behemoths. They landed, their boots splashing powerfully in the deep puddles, and knelt on one single knee before the soaking wet fired nurse. The lead operator's voice was urgent, raw with respect and undisguised fear. "Ma'am, the team is dying. We need your hands. Please, we need you on board now." The second SEAL operator, standing at absolute rigid attention beside his teammate, reached carefully into his tactical vest. He pulled out a combat patch identical to the one in Nora's secret locker, but this one was pristine, new and unsinged by combat fire. He held it out powerfully in the fierce glare of the chopper's searchlight. Unit 9, Combat Lead Medic, Nora James. A group of hospital nurses who had rushed out of the ER to film the incredible unfolding scene on their phones dropped their devices in unison, screaming in stunned, absolute realization. Oh God, she's the legendary Miracle Hands medic from SEAL Unit 9? Norah was hauled aboard the MH-60S instantly, the heavy side door sliding shut behind her with an immediate terrifying clang. There was absolutely no time to change, no moment for preparation, no second to adjust to the new reality. Her cheap, rain-soaked nurse's uniform, the very uniform that represented her profound professional humiliation, was still clinging tightly to her body. Inside the cramped, roaring cabin, a young SEAL operator, his face pale with worry and anticipation, leaned in close and spoke directly into Norah's ear, shouting over the overwhelming, continuous noise of the rotors. "Ma'am, we all genuinely thought you were declared KIA, killed in action, after the catastrophic Iron Ridge operation 2 years ago." Norah, her eyes already focused, sharp, and entirely professional, now completely devoid of any trace of the timid, easily intimidated woman from St. Mary's, calmly replied, her voice low and steady, "I survived, but I formally requested discharge, effective immediately, because I had personally lost too many brothers and sisters." She paused, the memory fleetingly crossing her eyes. "Iron Ridge cost me everything but my life. I came here to find peace, but clearly the fight finds you, whether you're in a trench or a hospital ER." Her gaze was distant, yet firm. Upon reaching the designated offshore coordinates, the second support helicopter positioned itself strategically. Its powerful searchlight immediately cut through the mist, focusing intensely on the damaged, smoking ship's cabin below. Inside the hull, amidst the haze of smoke, leaking coolant, and shattered machinery, a critically wounded SEAL lay frighteningly still, his chest completely immobile, his face taking on a sickly, unnatural cyanotic blue hue. He was seconds, literally seconds, from irreversible, catastrophic death. The team's primary medic, still dangerously pinned but conscious, struggled weakly, his face a mask of agony and failure. "I can't reach him. I don't have the leverage for the procedure. Only she can perform it now. Only Commander James can save him." Norah hit the deck of the unstable ship compartment immediately, without waiting for the safety crew. She didn't hesitate to completely remove her face mask, inhaling the hazardous smoke, an action that even the most seasoned combat operators would never risk in a hot zone. Her professional focus was absolute, surgical. She performed a lightning-fast, nonverbal assessment of the critically wounded man, her highly trained eyes calculating the complex damage in a fraction of a second. Her diagnosis was clipped, precise, and terrifyingly urgent. 5 displaced fractured ribs, severe tension pneumothorax. If we don't perform a complete pressure decompression and chest drain in 40 seconds maximum, he dies immediately. He dies. A young SEAL operator, his hands shaking violently from the combined adrenaline and the crushing severity of the situation, looked at her in pure desperation, unable to move. "Ma'am, we were never taught the full scope of this technique. We don't have the full surgical kit." Norah placed a strong, steady, reassuring hand directly onto his shoulder, her touch instantly grounding him amidst the total chaos. "Control your breathing, son. Watch me. Learn from this moment." In the next 27 seconds, a time that stretched into an agonizing eternity for the watching, helpless team, Nora James, the woman who had been fired for professional overreach, performed a life-saving surgical miracle using only minimal, improvised field equipment. She executed a flawless, rapid, and brutal sequence of life-saving interventions, moving with a terrifying blend of speed and confidence. First, opening the occluded airway with mechanical, instantaneous precision, securing the mandible with a unique 3-finger hold. Second, inserting a large bore, improvised needle for immediate, critical pressure release. The sound of escaping air, a terrifying hiss in the confined space. Third, performing a complex chest decompression to fully drain the rapidly increasing air pocket, ensuring the pleural space was clear of fluid and debris. This highly technical sequence was the reverse thoracic stabilization, requiring not just skill, but an almost inhuman steadiness of hand to avoid collateral damage. Fourth, clearing a devastating blood clot using a highly dangerous, swift action of suction and rotation, stabilizing the circulatory compromise. Finally, successfully arresting the hemorrhage of a damaged collateral artery using nothing but sustained, reversed manual pressure from her hand and forearm, utilizing pressure points known only to Unit 9 medics. It was a ballet of brutality, performed in scrubs and soaking wet boots. Before everyone's stunned, unbelieving eyes, the soldier's chest, which had been frighteningly still and concave, began to rise and fall rhythmically and strongly again. Life, powerful and undeniable, had been summoned back from the brink of death. A hardened, massive SEAL operator, witnessing the impossible with his own eyes, lowered his rifle to the deck and started to openly sob, his body shaking uncontrollably. She's real. The stories about her are real. She saved him. She saved us all. Another soldier, his voice cracking with emotion and profound reverence, spoke into the newly established radio silence. "Commander James, we genuinely believed you had left the fight for good. We mourned you." Norah, already securing the wounded man for extraction and applying a field bandage, looked up, her expression unreadable yet incredibly profound. "I only left the battlefield. I never ever left the people who need me." As the entire rescued team was safely secured and lifted out by the hovering aircraft, the base radio crackled sharply to life, broadcasting a single powerful message that echoed across the dark, turbulent water. "Unit 9 has been saved. Repeat, saved. All hands accounted for." The pilot, leaning down from his position, looked directly into Norah's determined eyes, a look of profound, eternal respect etched on his face. "Ma'am, they called you Miracle Hands in Fallujah. It seems they weren't exaggerating in the slightest," to 1445 words. "If you believe that the quietest people often possess the deepest, most extraordinary strength, please comment below right now and tell us what you think." I believe. The return to St. Mary's Hospital was arguably even more dramatic than the departure. Every staff member in the emergency room, from the janitorial crew to the attending doctors, poured out to witness the unprecedented spectacle of two massive military helicopters descending onto their usually quiet, civilian roof pad. The entire SEAL team disembarked first, their mission complete, their singular priority now changed to one of honor. The lead operator, completely ignoring the civilian doctors, shouted with unshakable authority and purpose, "Where is Nurse Nora James? We require immediate, unhindered access to her." The chief physician, who had just been smugly basking in the brief, false calm after the trauma wave, had his face instantly turn ash white. He stammered, unable to fully comprehend the terrifying shift in reality. She was dismissed. Fired 2 hours ago. How dare you trespass?" The SEAL team leader, the man Norah had risked her life to save, fixed the chief physician with a terrifying, professional glare that instantly silenced the entire ER crowd. "You dismiss the combat lead medic of Unit 9? You are asking me if you are out of your goddamn mind, sir?" Every single doctor, nurse, and support staff member in the emergency room was frozen in their tracks, rooted to the spot in stunned, absolute silence. The sheer, overwhelming, unbelievable weight of Norah's true hidden identity crashed down on them all. The small clique of nurses who had so cruelly mocked Norah's quiet dedication felt a crushing wave of professional and personal shame, a humiliation so profound and deep that they couldn't bring themselves to raise their heads or make eye contact. When Norah finally stepped off the powerful helicopter, her cheap uniform still damp, her hair messy and disheveled, but her eyes holding that steady, combat-forged calm, the entire hospital seemed to collectively hold its breath. She walked through them, a living legend momentarily returned to civilian life. A young resident doctor, his voice trembling uncontrollably with a mixture of awe and disbelief, managed to ask the single question on everyone's mind. Are you, are you truly a combat field medic? Norah, still walking, still moving with purpose, offered only a simple, humble reply, already heading for the exit. I just did what needed to be done. The patient is stable now. Behind her, the entire SEAL detachment performed a synchronized, utterly rigid salute, a sign of respect and eternal honor reserved only for the highest-ranking commanders and saviors of their brotherhood. The leader spoke, his voice booming loud enough for the entire ER to clearly hear, resonating with deep, permanent gratitude. Ma'am, thank you for saving our brothers. We are now and forever in your debt. If you truly believe in the quiet power of profound kindness and silent dedication, and that all good deeds eventually return, please leave a comment right now that simply says, I will be kind. 1 week later, the board of St. Mary's Hospital issued a formal, deeply apologetic letter to Nora James, accompanied by a lucrative, immediate offer for full reinstatement, complete with a massive 6-figure raise, a new title, and a prestigious supervisory role in emergency preparedness. Norah, seated in a quiet, sunny cafe downtown, calmly read the long official letter and then, without any regret or hesitation, sent her formal response. She firmly declined the entire offer. Her stated reason, written in her own neat, powerful handwriting, was simple and professionally profound. I do not do this work for recognition, or for titles, or for promotions. I do it solely to save human lives. However, the professional atmosphere inside the hospital had changed, fundamentally and forever. The ER nurses, the very ones who had once mocked her, now actively sought Norah out, humbly asking her to privately teach them her advanced, crucial emergency life-saving skills. One of the most resistant young doctors approached her on her final day of clearing her locker and sincerely said, if you are willing to come in and teach us, Commander, we are all ready to start over. Please show us how to be truly great. Norah finally genuinely smiled, a soft, warm, relieved expression that hadn't graced her face in many, many years. The redemption she needed was not a job title. It was this genuine, earned, professional respect. Outside the cafe, a small, discreet team of SEAL operators was waiting. They presented her with a brand new patch, stitched with gold thread, shining brightly under the afternoon sun. Unit 9, Honorary Commander. Norah took the patch, her eyes becoming slightly red and watery, finally allowing a tear to form. I won't return to the field, not yet, but I will always be by your side, brothers. As she walked away from the hospital grounds for the last time, 2 MH-60S helicopters flew low overhead, banking sharply in perfect synchronization. The silent, high-stakes military salute reserved only for a cherished, respected, and highly decorated commander. Norah paused, looking up at the dark, vast sky, the wind whipping her coat gently around her. Her voice was a quiet whisper, but her resolve was loud and clear. If just one person is saved because of what I taught them, that's absolutely enough. If you believe stories like this, about quiet heroism and hidden sacrifice, deserve to be powerfully told, leave a comment right now and subscribe to the Veteran Story. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.